Hi there, welcome to the series of Vue.js. In this section, we will discuss about computed properties and watchers. So let's start. Okay, so before we start, let's understand how a methods work. So let's suppose we have two properties here, x and y, and we have two methods, let's say getX and getY. So basically this getX and getY methods simply return the value of x and y property. Now in Vue.js, whenever we change the value of any property, then it will rerun the entire methods. For example, let's say we change the value of x or y to something else, then it will rerun this getX and getY. And if we change the value of y to something else, then again it will run both getX and getY. And it should not be the case, since we are only changing the value of y, and so it should only run getY method. But in Vue.js all the methods will rerun again, and which is not good for performance and not much efficient. So now let's see how a computed properties works. Okay, now let's see how a computed properties works. So let's say we have x and y again, and let's say both x and y are set to 0. Now they both have a computed properties called getX and getY, which simply returns their value. Now let's say we change the value of x from 0 to 1, then only getX method will rerun again. And whenever we change the value of y to 1, then only getY computed property will rerun again. So basically a computed property will rerun only when the source property changes. So in this case we have this getX computed property, and the source property here is x. So whenever the value of x change, then this getX method will rerun, and similarly with getY. Okay, so that was the computed property. Okay, now let's see how to define a computed property. So in within the Vue instance, we use computed and assign it with a object, and within the object we can write any name for the computed property, and then parentheses and then braces. So you might have noticed that the syntax of this computed property is quite similar with the syntax of the method. Although the syntax is same, but it's still a property, not a method. And whenever we call a computed property, we will not use parentheses, we will simply use that property name. Okay, now let's see all these in example, and let's try to understand. Okay, so I am back again in my Sublime text editor, and let's try to understand the method first. So let's first create some buttons. So button, and let's say increase x and increase y. Now here let's bind a simple click event, so that whenever we click the button, the value of x will increase by 1. So let's say v on click x plus plus. Okay, and remember, we can use the shorthand approach. Instead of writing this v on and then the event name, so for shorthand we need to provide @ and then the event name. And let's do the same thing with y. So click. Okay, so we are incrementing the value of x by 1, and similarly for y. Now let's define these two properties within our Vue instance. So in app.js file, okay, so we have defined our properties x and y, and we have set it to 0, and same with y. And let's call a method which will simply return the value of this x and y. So let's say value of x let's say getX method. We will define this method in a moment, and let's do the same thing for y. So value of y, get y. Now let's define these two methods here. So methods getX, return this dot x. Now remember, whenever we want to access any properties within our method, we need to use this dot and then the property name. So let's simply copy this method and let's change it to y. Okay, now let's give it a alert here so that we will know that this method is running. So alert, getX method is running, and alert, get y method is running. Okay, now let's try to run this in the browser and let's see what we get. Okay, so at the very first we got getX method is running and getY method is running. It's because we have called these two methods in our paragraph, so that's why they are called for once. Now let's try to click the button and let's see what we get here. So we got getX method is running, and also we got getY method is running. So as I said before, that whenever the value of any property changes, all the methods will rerun again. That's why both getX and getY methods are running, and we will get the same result if we click this Y button. So let's try to click it. As you can see, we got getX method is running and getY method is running. Okay, now let's do the same thing with computed properties. So let me just copy these methods here and let's comment out here. And as I said, in order to define computed properties, we use computed and then the object, and let's simply paste those methods here. Now remember, these getX and getY are basically the properties, so in order to call them we don't use parentheses here because they are properties, not a method. So now let's try to run this in the browser and let's see what we get. So now if we click this X button, getX method is running. Okay, so as you can see, this time we didn't get the getY method is running, because in computed property it will only rerun that property whenever the source data is changed. So here X is the source data for getX computed property, and Y is the source data for getY property. And since Y doesn't change, so getY property remains unexecuted. So now if we click here again, so as you can see, this time we got getY method is running. Now let's create one more computed property. Let's say getXY, and this property will return both X and Y. So get, so X and Y, and let's also give a alert here. So sorry, there, here it should be property, not method. Okay, now let's call this property. So let's create a paragraph here and let's say value of xy, get xy. Okay, so let's try to run this in the browser and let's see. Okay, now let's click X button here. So we got get X property is running, and we also got get xy property is running. Now why is that? Because, so if we have a look here, we can see here X property and Y property both are included. So basically X and Y are the source data for this computed property. So if either value of X or Y changes, then this get xy property will rerun. So that is the reason why this property is also running whenever we click X or Y button. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now let's see what is a watched property. Okay, now let's see what is a watched property. So basically, whenever a specific property changes, you can define its corresponding watch properties, which will look for the changes, and you can do some steps within that watch property. So let's see an example. So let's say we have a property called first name, and then we have a property called last name, and one more property we have which is full name. Okay, now in order to define a watch property, we use watch and then assign it with an object. One thing you should note that you must define watch properties same as the data property. So basically in watch property it will look for that property for the changes. Okay, so we can't write here like get full name or something like that. So we can write here first name. Okay, since first name is a property already defined here, so we can use it, and whenever the value of first name changes, this property will execute. And one more thing is that the value of this property will automatically get passed here, so you just need to define a local variable here, and then you can access the value using this val property. Now let's say whenever the value of first name property changes, you want to do something. So let's say you want to change the full name val plus this dot last name, and remember this val is nothing but the value of the first name property. So basically whenever we change the value of this first name property, this watch property will execute, and it will also give the current value of this property. So now we can use this value and append it to the last name and assign it with the full name. So now let's do the same thing with the last name property. So let's change it to last name, and let's say this dot first name and then the val. Okay, so basically whenever the value of last name property changes, this watch property will execute, and we will automatically get the current value of last name property, and then we can use it to assign with the full name property. Now let's show here the full name. So full name is full name. Okay, now let's run this in the browser and let's see what we get. So we got nothing here since we have assigned empty string with the first name and last name property. So let's change the value of first name here. So vm dot first name equals to John. As you can see, we got the John here, and let's also change the last name. So vm dot last name equals to Doe. Okay, so that was the watch property. So till then, if you enjoy this video, please leave a like and please subscribe.